My name is Gary Rutkowski for the Archive of American Television. Today is October 18th, 2006, and today I'll be interviewing Ron Howard in Beverly Hills, California.
Well,
Okay, we're on. First of all, thank you so much for doing this.
my pleasure.
And this is how we always start them. Can you tell me what your name was at birth?
Ronald William Howard.
And where were you born?
I was born in Duncan, Oklahoma, March 1st, 1954.
Okay. And is that where you grew up?
No, I didn't. I was born in Duncan. That's the town that my mother grew up in. And I was born there because my father, Rance, was in the Air Force at that time. And actually my mother had a stillborn baby on the Air Force hospital on the base the year before and felt very uneasy with this delivery about once again going to the base hospital. So she went home. And that's why I was born in her hometown. But I never lived there.
So you immediately went, where was it that you...
I don't know if they were in Mississippi or where they were based at that time, but my dad had 2 more years in the Air Force and then went to New York. And so we lived another couple of years in New York and ultimately moved to Los Angeles in 1958.
And did they stay in LA starting from 58 on? Was there no more moves?
No more big moves, no.
Mm-hmm. And what are your early memories of growing up in Los Angeles?
Well, mostly we lived in Burbank. And so in a lot of ways, it hasn't changed all that much. It was already a kind of an industrial town in a way, but with a very much a small town neighborhood feel, and that's still pretty much the case. My brother still lives there, my dad still lives there, and so I'm familiar with it. It was dominated by studios. Disney Studios was already there. Of course, Warner Brothers was there now, called Burbank Studios. NBC was up and running. There was another lot that's now owned by Warner's that used to be owned by Columbia. And then there was Lockheed. And, that whole area, that whole portion of the valley had really exploded during World War II because Lockheed was such a industrial military complex. And so there was kind of, that's kind of what you had. You had, some crew people working in studios, a lot of people working at Lockheed, and then, it was pretty blue collar, cops and teachers and people like that in the neighborhood.
And what was your father's name and what did he do for a living?
Rance Engel Howard, and he's an actor, also done some writing, done a little bit of producing, directed some theater, but primarily, best known as a character actor.
And what's your mother's name? What'd she do for a living?
She passed away a few years ago. Jean Spiegel was the name she used as an actress. Jean Frances Howard was her name, and she and my father had met. Dennis Weaver, in fact, introduced them at Oklahoma University in the 40s, and they had really a thriving theater program. My father had grown up on a farm in Kansas, my mom in a small town in Oklahoma, and they found themselves there as theater majors. Dennis Weaver introduced them, and later they remained friends, and my dad worked with Dennis a number of times on different projects. But my mom had been to New York once before and had done a year at the New York City School of Performing Arts, I think it was called, and had actually been hit by a truck and nearly died, and had come home to recuperate, and when she was kind of up and around again, went to the drama school at OU, which was nearer to home. But that's where they met, and shared this dream of tackling showbiz. And my dad, fresh off the farm, had this idea that he could be a singing cowboy, even though he really couldn't carry a tune and can't to this day. But he'd cut his teeth on Gene Autry and Roy Rogers, and that's what he had in mind. I think by the time they left for New York, he'd done some theater and broadened his horizons a little bit. But my mom they worked together in children's theater and so forth, and very great idyllic, nostalgic tales of traveling around the country doing Cinderella and Snow White out of a bus and things like that. But my dad finally started working in live television quite a bit in New York.
Now, when you think about your parents, what traits do you think that you inherited from them individually?
My mom had a kind of an organizational tendency. My brother Clint always calls her, the ringleader, and a kind of a can-do, upbeat spirit about things. And my dad, a quiet, focused. I always sort of say it's sort of like this Midwestern Zen kind of outlook on life. It's really disciplined, one step, one foot after another. Couldn't keep either of them down. Impossible to knock them down and keep them down. Unbelievably tenacious people, without anger or bitterness or anything. They just made a decision about the kind of life they wanted to lead, and did it. And of course, my father, Rance, who's done zillions and zillions of jobs and parts and plays and movies and TV shows, but he never became Gary Cooper. He never fulfilled his wildest fantasies with the business. But here we are. I think he's 77, soon to be 78. He's working more than he ever has, just almost constantly, and and he's very, very grateful. But he still has this wonderful, joyous ambition, appreciation, zeal for his work and the business in general.
So do you think some of these things rubbed off onto you, your personality?
I'm a very optimistic person. I'm a pragmatist. I recognize, all the possibilities, light and dark. There's even a part of me that's quietly can be quite the catastrophic thinker. But at the end of the day, I'm innately inclined to see the silver lining, and I think as a director, that optimism, pervades everything I do, and because I believe in the possibility of hope, and I believe in celebrating it, not to the exclusion of acknowledging tragedy and the fact that no one's exempt from a good measure of pain in their life. But I see this kind of balance, and it comes directly from my parents.
And how did you start getting involved in show business yourself?
Well, among my earliest recollections are of hanging around summer stock, summer theater programs, where my dad, having gotten out of the Air Force, but having had a pretty good resume before he went into the Air Force, he was directing a lot of summer stock and also acting. And I remember sitting around and watching the rehearsals. And this summer stock, I have great, memories of just constantly wearing a little life jacket and being able to jump in the pool whenever I wanted to, and feeling the freedom of that at age 2 or whatever it was. But my mom was around acting some, but then she was beginning to think about not pursuing it professionally. She didn't like the competition of it. But she would play roles and help, and my dad would direct or act, and I don't recall this, but the story goes that I started mimicking the dialogue, and my dad thought that was kind of funny, and everybody got a kick out of that. And my dad had toured in the national touring company of Mr. Roberts with Henry Fonda and a bunch of Jack Klugman, and a lot of, Burt Reynolds was in that part of that group for a while. And, it was a great production. And I guess he was directing a version of that play, and I started mimicking some of the dialogue. So we worked up a scene between Mr. Roberts, you know, in the movie version, Fonda played it, and also in the play, and Ensign Pulver in the movie that was played by Jack Lemmon, and I played Pulver. So by about the time I was 3, I guess I was doing this scene, and it was kind of living room entertainment for people. And
What was the scene? Which one scene?
it was this scene where Pulver winds up talking about making a stick of dynamite and putting it in the captain's toilet, and and captain's can, and blowing him off the throne or something. It was that's my recollection of it. But I know that it starts off with Pulver saying, "What do you think of me, Doug? Honestly." And so that was the first line of dialogue that I ever learned. "What do you think of me, Doug? Honestly." And then Mr. Roberts' line is, "Honestly?" And then Ensign Pulver says, "Honestly." And then he goes on and insults Ensign Pulver and gets him fired up. So then summer stock season's over. I guess it was like probably late 1957 or so. And my dad was making the rounds in New York, and at that point, actors would have agents and so forth. Mostly it was their job to daily go and visit casting directors and just see what was out there. And my dad was doing some live TV and stuff, but it was hard. It was hard. My mom had to work. She was working as a typist at CBS or someplace. And but he took me on the rounds sometimes. And he said we went into this casting office at MGM to see a casting director, and it was just flooded with kids. So he knew he wasn't going to be able to get in there, and so he left a note for the casting director and said, "Oh, Rance Howard, I stopped by, wondering if there's anything for me. And by the way, I have a son who's a fine actor." So he got a message back, "Why don't you bring your son in?" So they thought about it, and the notion of actually having a professional kid had never really occurred to them before, but they thought, let's see, let's try it. So I went in there. I have no recollection of any of this. Did this scene from Mr. Roberts. Apparently they said, "Can you learn anything else?" And my dad said, "I don't know, I've never tried, but let me see." And they had a scene. And I do remember learning this scene. And then they said they wanted to do a test. So they liked the way I did the scene, and they wanted to do a test. And I remember my dad and a friend of his, another actor, I remember practicing for this test, and my dad had the actor, a friend, hang a can from a broomstick, so it was like a boom mic, and move it around. And the idea was my dad was trying to teach me to concentrate on the other actor. And that's one of the first things that I ever remember learning was concentrate and really listen to the other actor. Look them right in the eye. Really, really listen to what they're saying. And, and your next line will make sense if you're just really listening. Don't pay attention to any of this other extraneous stuff. You may not have used the word extraneous. But we practiced. I really remember that. And I thought it was fun, And
in general, was your dad your coach for your acting career?
He's a great acting teacher, and could have always chosen to do that professionally because people caught on right away. They had a great knack for kids, and every once in a while, someone would ask him to be a dialogue coach on a film or a TV series or something like that because they could see that he had a natural gift for this, and did this for myself and my brother.
And what did they do with that test?
I don't know what happened with the test except I got the part. It was a movie called The Journey, and I was going to play Ann Jackson and Eli Wallach's little boy. And it was a movie about the Hungarian Revolution that starred Yul Brynner and Deborah Kerr, directed by this famous European director Anatole Litvak, and it was going to film in Europe. And my dad got a small part in it as well, and that meant they would pay my mom's way over there to look after me, and it was an opportunity to go to Europe. And so they started saying, "Well, do we want to have a kid in show business?" They'd heard all the same horror stories that everyone else had at that point, and they felt like, well, look, we're struggling actors, you know, we'll take this amount of money that he can earn, put it away for him, let it draw interest, buy bonds with it or something, and it'll be a start toward college. And he never has to do it again if we think it's a lousy experience. It was a pretty small part, but we did it. We went to Vienna, Austria. I remember so much about that. And we went just early in March, was right after my 4th birthday. I remember flying over. I remember landing at Shannon Airport, looking down at all the fields of Ireland, and then going on to Vienna, Austria, which is where it was filmed. It was snowing there. Oh, I remember so much about it. It was about the Hungarian Revolution. So I was constantly, you know, playing on tanks and hanging around with guys in soldier costumes. And Yul Brynner was, you know, loved kids, and he was always goofing around. And he would take the sugar glass and chew it in front of me and show me that it was just sugar, it wasn't real glass. And it was just this playground. It was this playground experience.
And how did you end up making your television debut?
Well, when we came back from Europe, because we also then just toured around and took advantage of the fact that we were over there and saw some of Europe, came back on an ocean liner, which I remember a little bit too. It was great. I mean, it's a fantastic experience. But a remarkable thing had happened. Television had pretty much moved from New York to Los Angeles. And my dad was mostly making his living working in television. He'd done quite a bit of live TV and then working in summer stock. But they were also making a lot of Westerns. And my dad, grew up on a farm, but his mother loved horses, and they always did a bit of ranching also. So he kind of fancied himself a cowboy. And he's still, to this day, a great rider and very comfortable around livestock and does a lot of Westerns. So he thought he better go to Los Angeles. So they had this 52 Plymouth, they packed that up, and we drove across country. And I remember that pretty vividly, and drove to a little tiny apartment in Burbank, California, on Cordova Street. And they then moved to a slightly bigger apartment across the way. Then we moved to Hollywood for a couple of years, and then the first home that they bought was on Cordova again. So Cordova Street in Burbank plays a big role in my life.
Oh, when you did that test, were you in New York or were you here?
That was New York. Mm-hmm. All that was New York.
Okay.
And
so you didn't do any kind of TV in New York?
No, but when we got here, my dad's agent put me up for a few things. And one of the things, the first thing was a sketch. What was Red Skelton's hobo character's name? Freddie?
Freddie the Freeloader?
Freddie the Freeloader. It was a Freddie the Freeloader sketch, and a bunch of kids, and I got this part, and I really remember Red Skelton, but I don't remember much else. But I guess there was like a little improving, and I was able to hang in there, and it was live TV still at that time, and I did well. So then a few weeks later, Playhouse 90 needed a little kid, and so at CBS, the word had Ethel Wynant, the casting director there, kind of knew that there was this little kid who seemed to be able to handle one live TV show, maybe handle another one. So I wound up doing a couple of the Red Skeltons and 3 Playhouse 90s, including one pretty large part in Playhouse 90. It's still, I might have turned 5 by now, but really young. And that just led to an unbelievable array of roles that year. I mean, I don't know, 20, 30 jobs.
What were the Playhouse 90s you did briefly?
I don't remember the titles of them, but the one that I remember most vividly was one where, because they had to dye my hair, was one where I was playing a Jewish kid, and the parents had dyed my hair blonde in order to hide me from the Nazis, and I don't know the title of it, But I remember getting my hair at peroxide.
Do you remember the concept of live TV? Were you at all nervous or anything like that?
No, I wasn't nervous at all. I mean, I was, I kind of knew that there was only one chance, and I knew that you could sense it, and I remember it, but not as a panicky thing. Mm-hmm. I made one mistake apparently on live television. There was this one episode of Playhouse 90, and there was a scene where I was supposed to be in a bathing suit and run out and jump in the back of a car, a convertible. It was a kind of a, I don't know, 30s style convertible. And they had done a snow scene. So in the back of the car, it had collected up a bunch of the wax paper. In those days, there were wax paper snowflakes. And apparently I came running out there in my bathing suit and reached down and said, "Snow!" and started throwing it up in the air. And of course that had nothing to do with the episode, and it was kind of giving things away. So everybody was a little worried about that, but then the director said, no, it looked like it was hilarious. It looked like he was pulling the stuffing out of the back of the car and thinking it was snow. So that was my one chance to really screw up a live TV show, and I guess we dodged that bullet.
Did someone tell you about that later on in life, or you don't remember?
I remember hearing about it right afterward.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but that it was okay, But it was fun. I mean, I found the whole thing pretty fascinating, and like they had I think my character drowned in one of the episodes, and they had a swimming pool, and you didn't see me fall in or anything, but my dad showed me how it looked deep, but it wasn't deep. It was just the way it was painted. And I remember him sticking his finger in, and the water only went up to about here. And, it was just learning the magic of putting on a TV show. But this led to, I remember getting to do a Twilight Zone episode with Gig Young. I remember doing...
Tell me a little bit about that Twilight Zone, 'cause it's sort of a famous one.
Well, it was only one day of shooting, and it was really close to home because it was shot on the lot in Burbank. The one that Columbia then owned and now Warner's owns. And so I remember walking to work. But it was really easy. I just had one little scene with Gig Young, and it was just pleasant. I don't remember much more about it than that, and the fact that I really liked Twilight Zone. So I was beginning to know I was actually on shows that I liked, which of course was fantastic when I started working on Dennis the Menace. And one year I did about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 Dennis the Menaces. I was kind of part of Jay North's gang there on that show. And which was always fun to be around the other kids. I don't think I had very big parts. I don't remember feeling any particular, challenge with it or having to learn a lot of lines or anything. But what was really strange is that it was the first year of the show, and they were trying to get Jay's hair to do that thing, that that exists in the comic books, where it's got like a giant tuft here that kind of comes back, and he used to be so miserable because they'd make him sit over in between shots with this kind of hairnet to try to form the hair, and then they'd spray it and stuff, and it was so annoying. And I just remember thinking, man, I'm glad nobody's doing that to me. And then the next year they gave up on that, and they just let his hair be natural. But
was there ever a point where you would watch shows and say, Dad, I want to be on that one, or anything like that?
I always kind of wanted to be on Leave It to Beaver, and because I just loved that show. And I got to visit the Leave It to Beaver set one time. Yeah. And it was fun for me. But, I did some of the Westerns like Johnny Ringo and, Cheyenne and, some of the popular Westerns of that time. And jobs like that. And Dobie Gillis. Dobie Gillis was really fun. I liked... Bob Denver was funny, and Dwayne Hickman was really nice to me. I remember, and it's another show that I really liked, and I had a couple of episodes of that, and I was enjoying all this. I always found it fun. I don't have a single stressful recollection surrounding any of those early jobs, and then. Most fun of all was this part that I got to do on an episode of General Electric Theater. The guy who was directing it also ran an acting class, which my dad took, a guy named Sherman Marks. So he ran this acting school. And I think I had even been down there and observed a little bit. But anyway, he cast me in this part. And it was called Barnaby and Mr. O'Malley, and it was from a then popular comic strip. And Mr. O'Malley was an imaginary friend, a male angel. Burt Lahr played the part. And we did this, I think, also out at CBS. And, God, they were great scenes. And, I mean, I just loved doing it.
Describe your part. What kind of...
I was this kid that really wanted a dog for Christmas. My dad was sort of a workaholic and not paying a whole lot of attention and certainly not interested in having a dog. And I was disappointed about that. I was kind of lonely. And I made a wish. I wish I might get the wish I wish tonight or something like that. I remember the scene looking out. And all of a sudden, Burt Lahr shows up, and in his Burt Lahr voice, saying, I'm your fairy godfather, and he tries like crazy to muster up a dog, with his hat, and he can't. And he had a little sort of a Tinkerbell character, and oh my God, who's the famous voiceover guy from Warner's? Did all the different great characters. Mel Blanc did the voice. So I remember Mel Blanc over here on the side, doing the character, and with a microphone, and he would also do some of the Warner Brothers characters for me.
Was this one live or was this one filmed?
No, it was taped.
Mm-hmm.
Taped, and I don't think it was in front of an audience. I think it was just start and stop, and but they did it pretty fast. We rehearsed and everything, and then they shot it pretty quickly, and and at the end of the day, somehow, Mr. O'Malley can never figure out how to get me a dog. I don't think, but my father gets the message, and I get a dog, and I think Mr. O'Malley did it, and it was a pilot for a TV series, and Ronald Reagan was then hosting that show, and I guess I didn't have much of a credit, but Ronald Reagan had seen the episode. And at the end, he just ad-libbed this thing and said, "It's special thanks to little Ronnie Howard, who did a wonderful job as Barnaby," or something like that. And so that led Sheldon Leonard to call my agent and say, "I'm doing a series with Andy Griffith, and we need a son. And I don't think that series is going to sell. So I'm willing to take Ronnie Howard in second position and put a hold on him." And so I remember going in and meeting Aaron Rubin. And for some reason, he said, "How tall are you?" And I said, "I don't know how tall I am." And but I could stand under his desk. So he thought that was kind of funny, that I could stand under his desk. And he said, "Well, okay, we'll measure my desk later." And but there was no real, I don't remember anything like an audition for the Andy Griffith Show. I just remember doing the first pilot episode, which Sheldon Leonard himself directed.
But didn't it also originate?
Oh, that's right. No, you're right. The first pilot, the pilot was on the Danny Thomas Show, actually, and that was done in front of an audience, and that was the first time that I ever remember being in front of an audience. But it didn't seem to bother me, and I had one scene, and I was sad and probably crying because my pet turtle somebody sat on my pet turtle or something like that. And I remember this little mechanical turtle that they had that was just a little cute toy that I was using as my prop. But that seemed to go fine. And
let me interrupt you right there because we're at the end of our first.
Okay.